all. Uh, Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you all for joining. Firstly, I would like to welcome the guest today, Dr. Kishore from Meenakshi Group. He's the CFO of Meenakshi Group. Thank you so much, sir, for giving your time to us and sharing your valuable insights on valuation. And we're really looking forward to learn the art of valuation, especially from startups point of view. So it's a thing that as startup grind, we've always like there are a lot of people asking us, how our company is valued, what is the methodology, and so on and so forth. So finally, we could get your time. So thank you so much. Thank you, sir. Uh,
Yeah. Uh, Thank you, sir. Thank you for introducing me to our team. While we are connected for a long time, I think this is a
yeah,
formal intro which is given. Uh,
yeah,
I first take this opportunity to appreciate Startup Grind. Startup Grind. The reason being, this is one of the very rare pro bono initiatives which is working wholeheartedly, unhesitatingly, committedly for the benefit of all the startups. I could see a lot of vibration even in our WhatsApp group, a lot of knowledgeable points, and some of the points are so practical that you will not find them in any of the best published books as well, and even the case studies as well. Maybe they are specific to some cases, but they're so knowledgeable, so good, and you can pick up a lot of intelligence from them. I would suggest the chats, some of the chats can be in fact transformed into text, small case studies, and a book can be brought out by Startup Grind. And the lead members, including Kashipji, Yashji, and other members, deserve an appreciation, which I humbly do. And with that, I request the host to start the session, please.
thank you for your kind words, sir. I mean, it's really, it's really, probably an honor to receive this feedback from you. Thank you so much for your kind words. So I think Dr. Kishore is a very humble man. Like he is the CFO of a very big group called Meenakshi. Those of you probably would not know construction. If you are out in Hyderabad, in that high tech city area, you would find their logos everywhere. I mean, they own a lot of these. They have done construction for a lot of buildings, and one of the big names in the industry. So thank you, sir. I think we are waiting to hear from you in terms of the great knowledge that you bring, not only from the construction industry, but also the broad scope of finance as such, because you've always been a continuous you've been very active writing about it on the blogs and on the internet, and also conducting a lot of these sessions for companies. So looking forward to learn from this this session. So firstly, sir, I will start off by just introducing in a very formal way, probably getting an idea of like how our company is valued, because the theme of the discussion today, or why people are here, a lot of us, we hear of Silicon Valley valuations, right? So I start a company today, and tomorrow, I'm valued 4 million or $5 million, and I want to raise funds, right? So a lot of us, like as early entrepreneurs or as startups, we tend to value our company or our idea, uh, not by the revenues, but by the potential that it lays in the future. So how, I mean, as a valuation expert, and you've been there and done that, so how do you actually look at valuations as such? So what's your, how do you look at it?
In fact, you spoke the words in your question as well. So the valuation is always done only on cash flows. We are valuing business, we are valuing an initiative, we are valuing a venture which will promise cash flows to the investor. Therefore, valuation is always done on the cash flow basis only. However, there could be few exceptions. Exceptions could be, for example, a venture is floated to create customer base for another business. In such cases, there could be deviation, there could be transaction base, there could be customer base, or there could be reference base, there could be pure database. Other than in such kind of specific cases, in all cases, valuation is done on the cash flows. The cash flows which the business started earning, showing, cash flows which the business holds to post in the days to come by virtue of the business prospects, by virtue of observation about the comparable businesses in the market, how they have been giving the returns, giving the revenues, giving the profits, whatever, to the investors. So this is the broad base. Then we have methods, practices, tools, etc. down the lane.
So a lot of, I mean, so as technology companies, a lot of us yet do not have revenue, right? So we don't have a cash flow. So what's the solution for those, who might make a lot of money in the future? Because, companies like Facebook never made any money, but they were valued a lot even before, they made a single rupee. So in that case, like, are there any other methods and ways of looking at valuation?
Exactly, sir. So when we spoke the special situations, those are applicable for most of the startups. The special
Yeah.
situations include understanding what is attraction created, understanding what is the determinative scope which is available, understanding what is the customer base created. Revenue comes first. The traction has to build. Then customers have to be linked in. Then revenue will flow. As with the flow of revenues, profits will flow. Therefore, the most important thing is having the product solution which holds the promise, which may have ideally passed, let's say, alpha and beta stages, then has the potential to build customer base. From this stage of alpha, beta, customer connect, then traction, then revenues, then profitability. In this path, looking at the stage of each of the companies, fundraising could happen right from the first stage itself, which is ideation stage, which is put to test of alpha product development, alpha, beta. Alpha testing is something which you do when the product is almost ready, but within your own entity to understand how it shows up when it is put for implementation, when it is put for sale, when it is put for service, how it would behave, how it would act, what service it would render. That kind of test, in-house test, is alpha. Once you are satisfied with the alpha test, then you put it for beta test. If you remember, sir, back then we were having a small discussion. One of the most established groups, Britannia, was doing beta test of some of its new biscuit products by giving free samples of biscuits in all their GoAir passengers, for all the passengers. At the end of the travel, before they deplane, a small feedback is obtained, oral feedback by four persons, beautifully dressed smart girls standing at the doors, and then taking the feedback on a quick basis, 4 5 points, understanding what was the of feel and what was the taste of the newly to be introduced biscuits which were given.
Yeah.
And after, whoever gave the feedback were given a small coupon sort of thing. At the end of the day, again, before they get into the airport, they were given another biscuit packet of the same, for the, as if they are compensated, as if they are treated for the feedback what they've given. That has collected them a genuine, true feedback about their biscuits, and also has created a bit of potential customer base. So this is
Right.
an example for beta testing. Beta testing. So you would extend your EdTech to some of the education institutions and allow them to do free of cost services, like now how Zoom is doing. So some of such kind of services will be given free of cost on trial run basis, and then you observe all the glitches if there are any, the suggestions if there are any. Then you have the roadmap, and you improve
Yeah.
upon the product which passes the beta stage. Then you have the customer connect traction. In this phase, even while you do not have the revenues, because the product has passed certain stages and holds huge value, huge business value, huge scope to create paying customers in the days to come, it will be valued on these bases: the product stage of development, the alpha test passing stage, beta test passing stage, customer connect, traction, revenues. So in these stages also, depending upon these volumes, the phases, valuation can be done, sir.
So, I mean, you have, as part of Meenakshi's, investment portfolio. Even I was, we were in fact in touch based on the investment, angle. So, as an investor, what are the, as part of your group, so what kind of methods do you kind of deploy when you actually value a company? So, how do you look at it?
Yeah, very interesting question, sir. Market methodologies are broadly three across the world. Market
Yeah.
methodologies, Whether we are speaking about a case in Afghanistan, Nigeria, Africa, India, US, anywhere, there are broadly three methods. There are multiple methods, but broadly celebrated, accepted, universally accepted methods are three. One is the market multiplier method, which is the multiples method. Two, income method, also termed as discounted cash flow method. Three, the cost method, creation of asset. These methods apply to specific organizations in a specific way. But broadly, discounted cash flow methodology is used, which is the income approach, is used in all the cases, even where you are employing the other two methods. Let us say market multiplier. EBITDA multiple of 8, sales multiple of 2, profit multiple of 5. Such kind of multiples which are evolved and are used are derived with an underlying concept of what kind of revenues could be generated, what kind of cash flows could be generated if these are the multiples. So these multiples in a way are the offshoot, are the resultant consequent manifest numbers of again DCF. Therefore, there are two methodologies if we have to reduce them. One is cash flow method, which is discounted cash flows or income method. Two, asset method or cost method. Cost method is if there is no IP, no special effort required except money. What is the cost involved in creating this kind of asset that would give you the cash flows? So income method, multiple method, and asset method are the broadly used three methods for established organizations. Now, in your previous question, you asked a very peculiar and startup related question. How are startups valued? Established practices will help valuing established companies. But startups don't have these kind of established practices or the metrics to suit these established practices. In such cases, what we have to do or what has been done in the industry for a long time is adopting a pseudo or a quasi DCF method, adopting Berkus method, first Chicago method, like that. Now, to take an example of first Chicago method is a mix of, it was first used in First Chicago, a venture capital small forum like Startup Grind only, and it evolved over a period of time, and today it became very big, accepted, celebrated forum. What Startup Grind would become. And First Chicago forum has used one method, which is also called like venture capital investment method. In that method, they deployed a methodology of understanding what is the base case scenario for a business. Base case scenario is what you have presented and what appears to be believable. If you tell me that 1,000 customers can be on board in the days to come, and each customer will commit 1,000 rupees per ticket per use, given the service what you hold as a promise. So 1,000 into 1,000 will be the valuation, the cash flows per annum on a base case method. What is the upside? What is the downside? So you make three cases: the worst, the base, and the upside. Then you will see what is the probability of each of these cases. The weighted average probability or probable of these three cases is the discounted cash flow sort of thing, which is used to determine the valuation for the business. This is called First Chicago method. There are other methods like Berkus method, scorecard method, like that. Most of them work in the same pattern. So these methods are used. Now, when we approach an investor, be it a friend, family, or a VC, do they tell us that they are applying Berkus method, First Chicago method, or scorecard method, like that? No, they do not tell. But they do their math. They do their valuation exercise employing these celebrated methodologies with underlying theme of, again, discounted cash flows. Then they open a dialogue with you the moment they find that this product would have passed beta, alpha, beta, and has got huge potentiality for scaling up, for value creation. Then when they open up a dialogue with us to negotiate the valuation of your venture, is when you will get to know what methodology is used by them. Is it a pure DCF method? Is it a Berkus method? Is it a scorecard method where some weightage is given to the qualification of the promoter, experience of the promoter, his track record in employment or venture creations, or his behavior, or even his pure academic track of what seminars he would have participated, what contribution he has made to research, or what contribution he has made to his own school, college in celebrating things, mobilizing funds, organizing things like that, all of them will be assigned a weightage, and thus you will get to the valuation of the venture. So is when we will come to know what is the tool which is adopted.
Right. So in your like experience, as far as the Hyderabad ecosystem is concerned, so what kind of methods did you deploy? Because let's like understand it first locally and then try to more.
Very interesting and very good question, sir. To start with, any investor is first looking at multiple, not imported from any other transaction, but multiple from a comparable transaction. Transaction. There are no two exactly comparable transactions. Still, people would like to import a multiple from a previous transaction and try to give adjustment in terms of premium, in terms of discount. So any similar organization being priced, being valued, being invested into at X multiple on EBITDA, on sales, revenues, on any other factor, customer traction, the number of customer base, whatever, is first taken as a base. Then they try to understand if back then SIFI was the best example. Back then, 20 years back, 24 years back, 24, 23 years back, SIFI was considered to be the best proxy in the market. And SIFI had this ISP ability, ISP tool, and many other payment relation, payment crossing, payment processing tools that was seen as the best example. Every other e-commerce company like Sulekha.com, there are many. Sulekha.com was a homegrown Chennai-based e-commerce platform which was created about 20 years back. There are multiple organizations which came out with similar ideas, similar tools with value addition, with differentiation like that. For all of them, about 1,000 of them, the benchmark was back then SIFI. So they took what was the valuation arrived, agreed upon, and invested into for SIFI. They gave discounts, premiums. There are some startups which enjoyed premium over and above what SIFI has commanded as a valuation. The features were so good. Maybe those features would require more investment, more grooming, then launchpad, all that stuff. But they held that kind of good features. Therefore, they deserved premium also. So in Hyderabad market also, multiples are imported first as a first stage thing. Then when the multiples are used to arrive at a value, for example, revenue into 2 times, revenue into 1 time, revenue into half a time, revenue to 2 times is the range. 1 time revenue is a widely accepted valuation for a company which has passed beta stage and has good customer base. Whether revenues have started giving you profits or not is a secondary aspect, but when revenues are there with certainty on the expenses. Revenue into 1 time is an accepted norm. Revenue into 0.25 times, revenue into 0.5 times, depending upon the industry nature, is acceptable. That is taken as a base. Then they also do a cross check on discounted cash flow basis. What kind of cash flows can be expected when we discount them at the required rate of return? What is the valuation? So these two are compared, and then the investment is being made again with the negotiation.
Right, sir. So yeah, I think let's understand the scenarios pre and post this corona time. So as an investor, you have seen like hundreds of pitches, would have heard a lot of people telling their stories and all. So how did this current the situation we are in, the COVID scenario, as an investor, like there are some documents that say, there are some reports that say some sectors will have a lot of demand versus some others not having so much. So as an investor, like what would you say? How do you see the pre and post scenario?
First of all, pre-COVID has been very good, sir. Very good, because 2018 we have seen close to 10.5 billion investment in all startups in India. 2019 we have seen close to 14.5, 14.6 billion. So it was almost 35%, 40% growth, which was phenomenal. Now, in the first quarter of 2020, the reports are that the investment volume is less than 1.75 billion also, around less than 2 billion, which is almost 60% down. So this trend could continue during 2020. That said, as you rightly pointed out, some sectors could have upside, or some sectors could have an immunity, a moat to sustain this COVID stress also and continue to demand good valuation. Maybe if we have to speak about this whole edtech, fintech, cyber security, and certain logistics sectors, they all may command more premium. Edtech will catch up with the industry like anything. It will catch up with anything. Next 10 years, it will have fantastic prospects. Fintech also will do extremely well. Then logistics also could have very good scope. Pharma will have very good scope. So some sectors are better placed when compared with other sectors, or maybe they are stealing a bit of other sectors' scope. So definitely, I expect lull in the post-COVID for some time, maybe a year or so, or 9 months from now.
Okay. So I mean, as a company like Meenakshi, you have been investing in a lot of shelter tech startups and startups coming up with innovative solutions for housing, or purely in terms of some innovations in materials, for example. So how do you see that right now? Like as a construction industry, like where is it heading right now?
The real estate and construction sector, real estate and infra sector, broadly will have a down period in the next 1.5 year time. Definitely will have a down time. The reason being, I'll use simple example. Whoever is living in a house, and he will think of purchasing another house only when he wants to upgrade himself, or when he is moving from his village town to a city and want to have his own house because he is going to stay there for a longer time. When new employment may not be created in the next 9, 10 months, 12 months, the demand for new houses may not be much. This is the first part of the question. Second part, what we have done, or what we have seen, was investments into PropTech. This is one of the phenomenon which you are seeing with Google, which was observed for a long time, over 3.5 decades with Microsoft and even Dell, IBM. What they have been doing, still doing, was and would be definitely, they invest into new technologies, new sectors within their own vertical, within their own industry. For example, we see a lot of PropTech companies coming up. It could be BIM, it could be Precast, it could be co-working, it could be the automated lift management systems like it. These all will hold huge value for the same sector, but may succeed or may take a lot of time to succeed, but will hold good value, holds good value for function. But when it comes to conversion into revenue and the scalability, we are not sure. If it catches up, those could be disruptions to the existing traditional caste institute or other methodologies. Therefore, in a bid to hedge our position in the industry, we chose to invest into PropTech companies, and have made a couple of investments during each of these last 3 years. And these investments will give us a bit of hedge in case if the disruption which is projected happens. We are hedged because we hold value there, and we may lose ground here. And if it doesn't happen, we may lose a bit of our investment value, but we'll hold our ground much stronger. With that objective, we have done those investments, and the methodologies what we saw are the same: DCF, cash flows, and what kind of disruption could these new technologies bring to the sector like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, talking about the most important thing perhaps is for any company is revenues. So, what you have seen a lot of companies, perhaps startups that wanted to invest in. Most of them don't have revenues. They are like pre-revenues when they come.
Exactly.
So, what would you suggest to companies in terms of as a CFO? How do you like them to keep their books? I mean, everybody wants to make revenue, but not everyone can.
Okay.
So in that scenario, what are the ways in which companies can still show good books? A lot of people want to know this, perhaps.
There is a bit of creativity involved in it. I will not name a company, but I'll tell the example of one of the companies in which I invested through my company long back. So I did the due diligence, I approved the valuation, and I convinced my chairman back then to invest, to make investments into it. And that venture got acquired by another similar venture, and we were returned good percent of profits, good percent. It was upward of about 30% back then. The creativity was, it was a it was a dental chain. They were issuing service stage service coupons, and each of these stage wise coupon will give you discount for each of the service, starting from dental checkup 40 rupees price and given to you at 20 rupees because it's the first discount, then cleaning, then fixation, then auxiliary facial treatment, XYZ, like that. At each of these stage you will enjoy discount, and the discount would increase as you continue to be the customer of the same chain. They structured a product like that, and they have shown to us, the investors, that the dropouts of the customers after they log in, after they hold the coupon, is hardly 17%. We inquired why. Then they have shown us the practical records of each of the patients and explained us the discount is increasing stage after stage. Because the discount is increasing, they are glued to this. And when they see the cost of that service with outside dental service provider, the cost difference is close to 40-45%, in some cases 60% also. Who would not prefer to save 50% of their cost when the quality of service is same, and enjoy the familiarity, enjoy the treatment what they get as an existing customer? So we had to accept all the future possible revenues as contracted revenues, while the truth is that these customers do not have any obligation to pay the balance money also in the next 3-4 years. So there is a creativity involved in how we project it. Now, showing the traction of the customers, the best of the valuation gurus have all said some of the companies which are bleeding in spite of having huge customer base, because the cost of acquisition of each customer has been very high, and the attrition of the customers is also high. If we can have a model where cost of acquiring a customer is low wherever possible, and the attrition, the exit of customers is far lower, then the traction what we can show is considered as revenue, considered as profits. As the scale up happens, because you'll be able to render service to each additional customer at a very low cost. Profits are not booked, are not clocked up, but are visible in numbers, which are proven, which are established as per our business traction, and also as per the comparables of the likes of Amazon, the likes of Google, the likes of DD Chuxing, the likes of down here in India, Delivery, maybe Inmobi, maybe Lenskart, maybe Baizu, which has broken even at a very early age, and has started returning profits to the promoters. So these ventures do show us how initial traction get converted into revenues, can get converted into profits, and can get converted into economic moat holding ventures getting established as a future realistic companies.
Yeah, I think that's a very good example that you've given, sir. I think a smart way of looking at the books, perhaps, and I think a crazy kind of a startup that would have been to show it that way. I think Yash, you wanted to ask something. Go ahead.
Yeah.
You had a question. Yeah.
Yes. So, sir, I think it's going in a fantastic way. The points that you have mentioned are amazing. One question that I always have is, there is a difference between how a US company evaluates a Indian company in terms of valuation versus an Indian company valuing another Indian company. For example, in the last session of Startup Grind, we had a great entrepreneur from Gurgaon, Ketan Kapoor, who started a company called Metal, which got sold to Mercer. If you look at that company, they have chosen Mercer because the previous valuation and the previous offers that they got from the Indian context were extremely low. Our counterpart of metal was actually sold at about 70 crores, while metal got sold for close to 250 crores. It's an undisclosed amount, but it is claimed to be between 250 and 300 crores. Where is this difference coming from is one question. And in discounted cash flow analysis, where does the concept of IP come into picture or brand come into picture? uh, and yeah, that's something that I wanted to know from you.
Okay. So there are two questions, both of them holding a lot of depth in their in their sense. The first one, so much of valuation difference between valuation given or accepted or negotiated by an Indian investor and US investor is not fair, to be open and honest. But why is this difference coming? Is an US investor, let's say we are talking about an investor from Switzerland who is looking at embroidery service using software package on apparel. An entity which is operating from Switzerland has access to funds at a negative interest rate of 3%, 2%, and at best he will hardly pay less than 1%. So if he can mobilize funds in his own regime, in his own country, at that kind of benign cost, and invest into your company with a service level agreement, with a supply contract arrangement, or with an idea to take over the company for his operation subsequently as a expansion plan, organic expansion, whatever, then he sees huge value in your business and discounts your business at a very benign rate of 2%, 3%, 4% versus Indian investor who is a bit traditional minded. I'm not using the word narrow minded, traditional minded, who compares his return with 12% bank loan, with 9% FD, with 7% repo rates. Of course, now repo rate is only 4%, even this kind of rates. And he thinks, if I invest in an FD, I get 6%. Why should I invest in a company at this rate? Is it giving me 6% return or not? Now, the comparison is something which is playing spoiled sport in Indian regime. Number one. Number two, the absence of thinking about the organic tie-up on a supplier basis is also absent. Google Capital is one initiative. Google Capital is one initiative which is silently playing a huge role in making investments at acceptable valuation to the venture owners. You are the venture owner. You are the master of your solution product. They are making their negotiation is less, provided they are convinced about the product's viability. They are not caring for the valuation. They are caring for the product viability. And those kind of companies are being groomed very silently by Google to get them into their own stable in the days to come. For example, I'll take another example, down Indian example of Bennett Coleman Group, Times of India Group. I am part of Economic Times CFO Ledger. It's a very privy close group where we exchange the high-end business financial aspects. Times of India has made close to 180 venture investments. Hardly people know about this venture capital initiative within Times of India. Approach is not so easy, but once an approach is established and once the product viability is established, they do not care much about the valuation, but they care about the product viability. Today, Magic Bricks is part of Times of India group. Then there are other ventures. In fact, if you look at any of the successful ventures, starting from Uber and down the line, many companies in Hyderabad also, many of them have got venture investment from Times of Group. The product viability is seen. Times of India Group is looking at this kind of investments, looking at the product viability and discounting the cash flows at an acceptable rate, not the 12% loan rate, not the 2% or 0% of Switzerland or Japan, Denmark, Norway, and other countries. Between these two, this is the reason for the valuation difference between a valuation happening from US investor and India. 2 points: one, the rate of discounting; two, the organic, inorganic expansion and the integration possibility which they see, which Indian investors are not seeing much, not paying attention. Then coming to the second one you mentioned about, kindly repeat the second question, sir. The second point is about?
Yes, it is about the intangibles that a company holds, like brand
IPs.
and the IP that
brand.
they hold. For example, I remember Captain Cook as a brand, the salt brand that we used to look at when we were a kid, that got sold for about 200 crores. And then I remember, I don't know if it was Marico or Procter and Gamble. One of them, they just shut the brand because it was conflicting with some other products that they had down the line. So things like this are purely, I feel, are you'll always see that one company that is valued so heavily that nobody believes such a thing can really exist, right? Snapdeal, for example, it kept growing and growing and growing until a point where the bubble just burst and Flipkart had to take it. Example of Freecharge, where it was sold to Snapdeal at 250 crores or something at that number, and then Axis bought it for only 70 crores. Those high ups and downs in valuation, is it the ability of the founder to make his way through and convince the other person saying this is the company's valuation, or is there something else that is beyond? Is it magic or is it logic? That's essentially what I'm trying to get to.
Very, very nicely structured question, sir. In fact, the question itself had a lot of logic and explanation and answer as well. Some other points need to be added, honestly.
Okay.
The other points are back to this IP question, sir. IP question. Let us take an example of ice creams. Quality ice creams as a group has built good goodwill, respected goodwill over a period of 20-25 years, close to 20 years plus. Then when they could not expand or meet the capex requirement, they sold the one part of their ice cream division, the retail segment division, to the big name HUL for a good valuation. Then they negotiated a lot and fought, negotiated and gave up on valuation to retain the quality brand for a different set of business within the same vertical. For the B2B segment and for industrial segment, they wanted to render their own services under the same brand, which they thought holds huge value, and they wanted to recreate similar entity into this new segment or other segment and derive a lot of profits. But what happened was, after they sold their flagship brand on retail end, what was left with them was industrial segment, and industrial segment did not catch up as per their expectation, and the brand value almost turned zero or invaluable. Zero. It did not hold any value, not invaluable, no value, and they could not derive much of business even from this. And it has gone to NCLT. They are struggling a lot. Had they agreed for the valuation, the holistic valuation for the whole of the brand, including the industrial segment also, maybe the money what they would have got would have been much higher than what they can expect now, even in the NCLT resolution and all the liquidation process. Much higher, multiple times. Sometimes brand will hold value when it is owned by an entity which is established, which can spend on the brand and then nurture it further. You spoke a couple of good examples. Another example in the same line of your example, Food Panda was acquired by Zomato. Zomato. And Zomato thought Food Panda is almost a competitor to them, and there can be two ventures running on the same brand, Zomato and Food Panda, and that can give huge revenues for them, valuation for them. And then suddenly they realize Food Panda is eating away, is eating into their own revenues, and there's no fun in running two ventures, and they shut down the Food Panda brand altogether. That has caused huge disturbance to Zomato. Of course, it has overcome the disturbance, but still, had that venture not happened, their revenues would have been much stronger than what they are now. So these kind of disturbances happen, and the brands will hold value. There is an example which I would quote. I would like to quote as it's a matter of fun. In one of the national level seminar, the speaker was asked to explain what is brand value or what is brand addiction. Then he gave an example. If you pick up Jandu Balm, Amrutanjan, Tiger Balm, Sastri Balm, or any of these 4 top balms to apply, to smear on your forehead when you have headache. It is treatment. If you get headache, if you do not apply these balms, that is brand addiction. So there are people who apply saying, if I don't apply, I'll get headache. That he says is brand addiction. So there is a brand addiction for some brands. Some brands. People do not purchase the product at all if that brand is not available. Of course, that kind of brand addiction these days is far lower. But the brand valuation does hold good. Kingfisher example, sir. Down here, I'm speaking from Hyderabad. Of course, couple of our other friends are from Delhi and Bombay, as I am seeing from the participants list. But down here in Hyderabad, Deccan Chronicle had a valuation of 100 CR plus for its brand at some point of time. Because of the disturbances, when it underwent losses, it lost all its value. Kingfisher had 500 CR as a valuation on its brand. When it was put for auction at some point of time, the valuation was upward of 500 crores. When it ran into losses, the valuation was not even close to 5 crore rupees. So 505 crores valuation, there is no match. So brand plays a value only in 2 cases. Number 1, if the business runs successfully continuously. 2, if the brand can be separated and the ownership entity, the owner of the brand need not be known, is not known, and the brand itself can operate on its own in the market. Some of the pharma brands are sold on brand strength only. People hardly know who owns Sensodyne. People hardly know who owns some other products like this. The name of the product itself has got more value than the group, than the owner who is owning the brand. Such cases, brand will hold huge value. It is possible. In fact, I'll take an opportunity of explaining further point, with your permission, why we should get into corporate format of the business, run it separately as an entity than as an individual is. When you turn corporate and run your business with full board, with whatever streams required, with functions, departments, and streams required, you are creating value for your business and also for yourself. There is a possibility of raising 2 levels of debt, one at the company level, one at individual level. You enjoy goodwill for yourself as a promoter, you enjoy goodwill as a business which you own. So these 2 can be separated at some points of time. Therefore, the valuation can be much, much higher than what it could be in reality. So the when promoters pledge their shareholding, they get high amount of loan. Same shares of that company, when we pledge them, we don't get that amount of loan. We get far lower amount of loan. What this tells us, there are 2 levels of goodwill, one for the company, 2 for the promoters. This one for promoter, one for company is possible because you have corporatized your entity, you separated your business from yourself and then ran it on a different platform. That is the end point for this question.
Another question, I think, before Kashyap comes back and continues with his line of questioning, for a company or for a startup, I mean, for any company, is it cheaper to take, cost of capital, is it cheaper via debt or via equity? I remember one of the founders saying that exchanging equity and raising money is the worst form of bringing capital into the company. While most startups actually go into the same thing because they don't have they don't have collaterals or they don't have strong books. But is there another way? And really, is it really so expensive to exchange equity and get money into the company?
Sir, I agree with what he said. There is a theorem by name financial pecking order. Financial pecking order applies for established companies. What this financial pecking order explains us is there are pecking orders, steps of raising funds. The cheapest form is public deposit. Hawkins pressure cooker raises public deposits at about 7.58%, whereas its bank loans are about upward of 13-14%. The cheapest form is disintermediating and raising funds directly in the form of debt. So if you take a family loan, friendship loan, that comes at a 15%, 10%, 9% interest rate. I'm talking realistic numbers. If you go to a bank, if you're capable of raising bank funding, it comes at 10, 12%, whatever. But because a startup may not be able to raise bank loan, in the initial stage, you may look at family loan, friendship loan, relative loan. These are like indigenous bankers. They come at 9%, 15%, 12%, like that. This is the cheapest form. Public deposit is the cheapest form. Then comes commercial papers. Then comes bonds. Then comes debentures. Then comes bank loans. Then comes preference capital. And the last one in the financial pecking order, which had to be resorted to unless there is no other option, is equity. Equity is the most expensive capital because it is the most riskiest capital. It bears the whole of the risk of the business. If anything happens to the business, you will have to first pay your friend loan, family loan, then bank loan, then preference capital, and finally, whatever is left, and if left, is your money. Is your money, which means the maximum risk, the residual risk is always held, owned, borne by the owner. Therefore, equity is considered the riskiest capital and most expensive capital. This is the financial pecking order theory applicable for all businesses. But for startups, we have to give a small exemption because how will we be able to raise public deposits? Not possible. We will not be able to raise a commercial paper? Not possible. We will not be able to issue bonds? Not possible. Debentures? Not possible. Bank loan also may not be possible. And preference capital is not realistic for a new venture. In some cases, it is possible, not in all cases. Therefore, what we may have to dilute is always equity only. But by planning in a systematic way, mobilizing equity on a stage basis only as per the need of the business and deploying it fully in the business will allow you to dilute lower stakes at lower stages than diluting all at once. The latest example, although not a startup, Reliance. It has mobilized that kind of amount, 13 billion amount. And if you do a simple math of what is the valuation on a percent basis, the valuation kept increasing as the percent kept decreasing. Within 10 days time, the valuation kept increasing for the company. It could be for various reasons, but this holds good for a startup also. Initially, if I have to mobilize 1 lakh rupees, I may have to give 10%. Next year, for me to mobilize 10 lakh rupees, I may have to dilute only 5% or only 1%, 2%. Therefore, we should plan in a realistic way to dilute on a stage basis, so that you not dilute much. But without diluting equity, if you resort to debt, the leverage will eat into your ability of servicing the debt and focusing more on financial transactions than on your business transactions. Therefore, financial pecking order, which was explained by our previous respected learned founder, was very good. It holds true for all businesses with small exceptions and adjustments required for startups. So startups should resort to equity funding up to 26% or a shade lower than 26% if possible, and if warranted, can go up to 48% also.
Thank you very much for that elaborate answer, sir. A couple of our participants corrected me. I think I've made some errors there. So it was 400 million for which Snapdeal got 400 million at which FreeCharge got sold, and then it was at 60 million that Access acquired it. So I stand corrected there. So Deepak has one question. I would like to read it. Vikas has a question. I would like to read it out. What are the open public platforms available so that one can do the comparison of their own company while doing their own valuations? Is there a platform where the comparison can happen between how they have come up with their own valuation versus how others are coming with valuation?
So I'll be honest, I'm not very sure about it. But then when we are valuing, we have done a small mock-up pitch session for some startup aspirants like your young team. This session was done in Kolkata. What we have done was, we told them to come up with comparable valuation. They gave their pitch, they explained their revenues in a very granular way, how their valuations are derived, and how they justify their projections on the stuff. Then we ask them to come with some comparisons. They could come up with comparables which were almost realistic. So they took from the public news and they did a bit of backward math, and they understood what are the multiples which are employed by each of these valuations, and they did the exercise. About a platform, I'm not really sure if there is any available to adopt the data directly.
Okay, got it. There's another question from Ravi Teja. So his question is the geography okay? Does geography affect startup valuation? If so, will it make sense to migrate the startups to geographies where startups enjoy high valuation, like example Silicon Valley for startup companies, Europe for industrial IoT, etc.? I think a very fair question, because I see a lot of companies, a lot of Silicon Valley companies at a similar stage getting a different multiplier on their valuation. So what is your take on it? That doesn't give any benefit for a startup to be in high interest rate countries, correct?
Correct, sir. This has got to do with the political risk, the interest rate regimes, and the investor culture which is prevalent. Very surprisingly, while we see many Indian companies, many Hong Kong companies, many Chinese companies, and many Korean companies also having their holding company in Singapore, even Korean companies. Korea has lower interest rate regime when compared with India. Even they also choose to have their holding companies are based in Singapore because they feel the investment culture in Singapore is much better than it is in South Korea or in China, Hong Kong, like that, in much more in India. That said, we have to be very wary because most of us are aware that Singapore companies, having a company in Singapore doesn't come with low cost of expense. It is relatively expensive. There are certain parameters like you need to have X amount of capitalization, X amount of revenues. So having a shell structure in Singapore will not do any help. And to have that kind of initial revenues, it may not be possible for the businesses. Capitalizing your business there to the extent of 1 million may not be so easy. Having one local director also will come with a cost. And the nomad, the advisor or the financial advisor auditor also will come at a cost. So if a business reaches a stage, not necessarily up to growth stage, reasonable stage, then having the base in Singapore is advisable. That said, will it be possible for us to run business in India up to an extent and then shift it to Singapore? It may not be so easy for everyone. One of the examples, let's say Jobiak. Jobiak, many of you know, he's a person from down here from this region, one of the successful HR technology entrepreneur. He made good exits as a promoter in a couple of ventures and started Jobiak, having his register office in Delaware and mobilizing funds from India and there and doing very good in partnership with Google and other good big names, a well-respected business venture. He has his venture in Delaware because the Delaware laws are very conducive, comfortable for investors to have their business there and mobilize funds. He could do this because he has a capital base for his business, which he earned from other businesses. There are a couple of ventures which are having their base in Singapore, which are supplying motor technologies, some parts of automobiles. They are having their base in Singapore because they have good capital base. This difference is existing because of political structure. Number one, the ease of mobilizing funds there. The interest rate scenario appears to be attractive, but interest rate scenario is not the real case because Temasek, Capital Land, Ascendas, Singbridge, Semcorp, Mapletree, and multiple names, GIC, multiple names, all of them from Singapore, partly government companies and PSA Marine, all of them from Singapore, big corporations making huge billions of investments across the world, having their base from Singapore, source of funds from across the world and mostly from Singapore, should be making investments taking lower discount rates, but they're not. They are employing Indian discounting rate only Indian discounting rate of 15% to 18% when they are investing in Indian companies. They are not giving the benefit, passing on the benefit of the source of capital which they have in their country when they are able to make investments in India. Therefore, what I feel is interest rate scenario which we are seeing is only an attraction, not the reality. Geography as a attraction or as a factor will play a role only if we can have the minimum capitalization requirements and the ability to source funds at the holding company level.
There is okay. What is capitalization requirements that you have mentioned? Can you explain it in simple words, sir?
Yeah, sir. It says you can't have a shell company there, and receive funds in the form of preference capital or debt and route it to Indian company. You need to capitalize the company by having a paid up capital of X amount. Once you have paid up capital of X amount, and once you have 10 employees, minimum 5 employees, minimum as per their companies, as per their country's requirement. These conditions are prevalent in many countries. In fact, Hong Kong has got, if I'm not wrong, some conditions like this. Singapore has got these conditions, and South Korea has got these conditions. Therefore, to comply with these conditions, your business will have higher expense. Other countries, other regimes, other tax havens like Mauritius, Isle of Man, British Virgin Islands, Guyana, these countries don't have these restrictions. For example, on a lighter vein, to understand the example of Amazon, people said, public reports said, Amazon has got their Apple and Amazon, all these countries. Apple, in fact, as a specific example, Apple has got its base in Ireland, a tax haven regime, location, jurisdiction, and is alleged to have evaded close to 10 lakh crores equivalent money in Indian rupees in the form of tax. They could manage, they could avoid, or they could save 10 lakh crores of tax amount by having their jurisdiction in that country. And the number of employees what they had there are 3. With 3 employees having such a kind of base there, they could manage or maybe save, avoid whatever 10 lakh crores equivalent tax payments. And Ireland is one country which has been seeing downtrend and has been cutting salaries for the government employees also. Leave alone about private employees. Even for government employees, there have been pay cuts on a sequential basis. So this kind of amount what would have been paid, if collected, collectible, would have saved the whole country for a span of 6 years. So these are the broadly features, sir. The specifics are slightly different from country to country.
Okay, so what are the common mistakes that startups do on the financial side that you have noticed? That goes with, a question that also one of our audience has said. Sailesh was asking, what are the important, most important terms that you have to remember when it comes to valuation? So both sides, what is the most important and what are the common mistakes that startups and companies do when it comes to valuation?
I was part of this mistakes committing team. Maybe in age I am slightly older than all of you, but otherwise we have all committed these mistakes. And I will list out some of the mistakes. I'm just jotting down. What are the major mistakes? Planning the execution of a venture without planning the source of funds for the plan. We will chalk out, we'll start one branch, we'll start one online link, we'll start one offline link in various locations. And to roll out these plans, we require funding, which we may not get, which we may not be able to mobilize on time. And that expansion plan will disturb our existing base also. The example of Lenskart, when from a pure online venture, when it started to embark into offline also and have multiple stores, they faltered at the first step when they didn't have sufficient funds to roll out their offline. They didn't plan a very wide offline brick and mortar stores also in the market. They only had the plan of having online and linking through logistics supply. They realized that as far as these goggles and these spectacles is concerned, glasses is concerned, human touch and human verification and on the shelf comparison will play a huge role than only on screen comparison. They realize that and they leverage upon their brand and rolled out the physical stores across the country. They faltered a bit because they were not prepared for this kind of capex. Luckily, they caught up with less disturbance and raised subsequent rounds to meet the offline stores also and had brick and mortar stores. Today, they are one of the leading spectacles, goggles selling company in the country by virtue of this catch up. But many startups will not be able to have these catch ups, and the plan of executing is not backed up by the plan of funding. That is a major mistake what I see. Then not drawing salary for the self services. You are a CFO, you are a CEO, you are a MD, you are everything, and you will think if I also draw my salary in spite of it being justified, I am having a cash drain on the entity, and you are skipping that part. Subsequently, when you see the first sign of growth traction, revenue traction, or profit traction, post BEP, pre-BEP, then you want to book your salaries, which are very deserving, justified, and needed for your personal self and family. Then you'll introduce one line item saying salary to me, promoter, CEO, CXO, CFO, CHO, and CMO, all that stuff. An investor will have a frown, a big frown, and he will say, why so much of money to you? You are holding your equity, you derive your dividend, like me as an investor. Let us hire a professional CEO and pay him the market pay. Why should we pay so much of money? And you continue to render your services like a promoter, take the benefit in the form of dividend. And dividend is not forthcoming. We know for sure dividend will not come every year. It will not start in the immediate future. So you will be strained, cash strained. This puts indirectly huge pressure on us in diluting more equity. Then you will ask him, sir, I need some funds back home. Then he will say, okay, dilute a bit more. I'll allow you to take some funds to home. Take some funds, some cash out for self, which means we are in a fix. We get into this kind of trap by not fixing an appropriate salary for us, not having an employment agreement for us with our own baby, with our own venture. Formalize it, take a bit of salary, have upside contracted for yourself with your venture, and keep drawing it. If required, wherever required, let there be tax cut. Turn your money back into the company in the form of equity, show your commitment. Therefore, you can up your equity portion and you can have your tax returns track record built. And if required, you can use a bit of that money also for your personal requirements, which is very, very essential, which is missing in 90% of the startups.
I think this is a brilliant point. I think a lot of our audiences, they are very happy to hear this point. So you're saying it is better to take salary and flow it back into the company and show your commitment as a founder than actually not showing salaries on the books, right?
Exactly, sir. Exactly.
Okay.
Sir.
Okay. Interesting.
We need to draw our salaries right from the first day. We need to draw our salaries right from the first day.
And show it as burn or something, but then you, to prevent cash flow issues, you sow it back into the company. Okay. Very interesting point. Exactly. Carry on, sir. Go on, sir.
Then, sir, being too possessive, not diluting equity, they'll have a lot of possession about their idea, about their business, and they don't mind taking debt. They'll not dilute. Then they get into the trap. Debt can't be repaid. Business gets into financial problem. The whole entity will have to go for a small price, which doesn't pay for your professional efforts. Then, sir, not thinking of OPEX model. I'm seeing some of them have come out with a beautiful product of measuring the body measurements without touching. I think all of you would see the fit body, about 4 or 5 players are in this field. We had the opportunity to evaluate a couple of those ventures. Salman Khan himself had invested in one of the venture, and a couple of others also have invested to give our tailor-suited clothing, to measure our body BMI, and also to understand what is our strength. They do the measurement without touching us. So you have to just pass through a chamber, small chamber or a box. It takes the measurements with the all automated lenses. That guy had a small mistake. The mistake was he could have got all of these capital machinery on lease basis, but chose to own them, thinking I'm saving a lot. It is like owning a tractor for 10 trips of your total requirement, thinking then I can also earn the same way he is earning. Into which business are you getting into? Tractor business or trailer business? You are a techie. We have to reserve our business scope into our core area. So wherever possible, better we stick to OPEX model. From OPEX to CAPEX, you can always shift. You can always shift. It makes more sense to shift into CAPEX model subsequently by sticking to OPEX model and having asset light model, having proper revenues until you stabilize. That is one of the mistakes what we see. Then not being able to assess the credit worthiness of the customers. We accept whatever customer demands in the initial stages because we need a customer. While we may accept whatever is demanded by the customer, I personally feel you need to have terms of reference, your service level agreement or your contract agreement, detailing all of your demands, all of your terms and conditions. Then give a go by, an exemption waiver on a case-to-case basis, understanding what is the probability of realizing the debtor amounts. This should not be a phenomenon for startups, not realizing our debtors, but in reality it is faced by most of the startups. They are also facing this working capital crisis because debtors are not paying. Therefore, we also need to be smart in assessing the credit worthiness and the character of our customer, and then allow them the debit period of 15 days to 3 months, 2 months, whatever we are doing. These are broadly mistakes. There are a couple of them, like spending more time on funding plans than on business. Many I do. So they redo their investment IM on a daily basis. They update it today, they meet with the person, they have a dialogue, and they change the business model. Business model changing on a daily basis is something which you should be worried. So these are some of the mistakes.
Changing the business plan on a daily basis is an amazing point that you mentioned. Is there any thumb rule on when to switch to a capex intense? I mean, when do you start getting into capex versus keeping everything on an opex and a capital asset light model, sir? What is the rule that you have?
Gradual, sir. Firstly gradual. Let us take the example of courier services. Let us take the example of other ventures, even pharmacies. They have few of them company owned, few of them franchises. Company owned are capex, franchises are opex. And as they increase their business strength by virtue of exercising their right of purchasing the franchisee and making it into their branch or subsidiary, or by minimizing or containing these franchises and expanding very rapidly with companies' own branches, companies' own subsidiaries, showrooms. This is how they do. We can derive a point or lesson from that. What we can also do is one capex, machinery, plant, line, transaction, many opex, then one becoming two becoming three, or three from 3 to 10, 20. So that way, gradual progression is always better to shift into capex model. This gradual progression allows us a smooth transition, number one. Second, it will tell us what is potential and probable for our business expansion. Therefore, we will not run the risk of having huge debt or huge equity dilution or huge fixed overheads, which could sink the whole venture itself.
Got it. So there is a lot of complaints that goes into managing finances, right? For a lot of people, that is a big aspect of how they run a business, and it's also a cost on the startup. What is the best practices that you recommend when it comes to financial compliances, sir? Where did you see people making mistakes?
Yeah, this compliance is a very important part, sir. In fact, about a month back, we had on the same MSME sector, we had this webinar where a couple of your colleagues also were speakers and then participants. We could interview 3 chairmen and MD of 3 leading public sector banks. In that interaction also, we stress upon the same point. A couple of your other team members also stress on the same point. Compliance is the key. A business will stand stuck in the middle of dialogue on valuation for want of compliance. Believe me, sir, one small FCGPR pending, foreign currency general progress report pending with RBI, one small form pending with Companies Act, ROC, one income tax return not filed in one of the days, one GSTR not filed, service tax not filed, of course now not service tax, or one of the bill of lading not filed. These small things will come back and bite and reduce your valuation by 15%, 10%, 5%. Imagine one small form which would cost hardly 1,000 rupees, 500 rupees will come back and bite us very, very severely. Therefore, compliance is the key. Now, I am very thankful to listen, grateful to listen to your members stating that you are planning to take this startup brain to the next level by having an advisory group, mentor group, who will source and have empaneled professionals like chartered accountant, advocate, cost accountant, company secretary, and other costing experts who would render services to startups at a discounted price because they have prototype services and can afford to render at a lower price, and all the startups will take the advantage of this lower cost. And because they keep doing these startups, same services, it's easy for them, easy for us, not much of dialogue is required, time saves, cost saves, compliance will be ensured, all that stuff. I am very thankful for the initiative what you are now pursuing or putting it into the pipeline. It's a roadmap, very good roadmap. Therefore, with this kind of helping hand from you, compliance can be easily ensured. So compliance has three parts, sir. One is statutory, which is like ROC, income tax, GST, XYZ. Then business related, the IPRs, filing a trademark. If trademark filing is expensive, sending simple letter, mail, message to all possible potential customers, potential competitors about our R&D happening, about our prototype product, about our prototype solution will save, will reserve IPR in a quasi way. Even if you do not hold a registered IPR, if you could prove that you have communicated about your product, service, and about your efforts and value, time invested into it, you will have an edge over the other, even IPR holding entity also. So this kind of smart practice of having the IPR value with you whenever possible, wherever possible, filing for the IPR registration, this is second business related. Third, funding related. Funding related is registering with Startup Grind, registering with accelerators, registering with our DIPP to be eligible as a startup, registering with some of the advanced mentorship programs funded by some IAMs and ISB where some pro bono services are done. These all will give you the advanced strategy related compliances. So statutory, business, strategy. These three compliances need to be coupled, and we have to balance them.
Okay, got it. So startups raising money, right? What do you think are the best sources? There is angel money, then there is VC money, and then there even amongst VC there is foreign VCs and Indian VCs, right? There are multiple combinations. What do you, from your experience, suggest a startup depending on the stage where they are? What is your what are your inputs there, sir?
Sir, first we have to look at stage of funding. The stage of funding will have to start with bootstrapping. Our own funding will have to be impressive. It need not be substantial. For the first, second, or third initial baby steps, we have to fund ourselves. Is it your initial salary saved, your pocket money saved, father given money, whatever? It has to be bootstrapped by the 1, 2, 3 members, whoever, or for whatever team is promoting a venture. It needs to be bootstrapped. For me, as an investor, as a fund manager, I have always seen what was the initial amount. You will not believe, it may sound funny. I did interview many promoters, startup promoters, CEOs, startup entrepreneurs. I asked him, her, can you kindly explain me what is the amount you have invested on your own into this venture? Then there were blank faces. I inquired them, no, please kindly think. You have traveled on your bike, you have traveled on your car, you have traveled on a bus, and you spent your time, you used your mobile, you used your internet. Capitalize all of them and tell me what is the amount you have spent on all these works. You have done a lot of research. You could have tutored someone and made 15,000, 20,000 rupees per month. But you have not done that. You have spent your time on R&D. You have done a lot of online research and then collected a lot of details. Please monetize these things. Translate them into the numbers and tell me what you have invested. Then came the numbers. of starting from 2 lakh rupees up to 15, 16 lakh rupees per annum, in some cases per quarter. So that is the investment what they have made. So in one of our questions, we discussed this. Monetizing the amounts what we invest, the efforts what we invest, then showing what we have bootstrapped our venture up to is the first stage. Then family, friends round, then as you rightly mentioned, the sequence of angel round, then the venture capital round, then the strategic sale or IPO round, whatever it takes in the whole sequence. But why I'm stressing more on bootstrapping is the bootstrapping should be sufficient enough to hold or to command respect, to go and talk to father, family, that you require 10 lakhs more, 20 lakhs more. Until you command a stage of respect to demand these 20 lakh rupees, it should be bootstrapped. So are we prepared for this kind of amount? If not, how do we mobilize? Earn a bit, invest, take from family, or include few more team members, convince them and have the common idea, then invest. That is very, very important. Then coming to sources. Sources cross with stages in some cases, but first earning should be from your small salary. Small salary. It is either salary or pocket money. Understand someone, a lady or a young man like you explaining, sir, I use my pocket money as my first bootstrapping capital. So the investors who are sitting on the other side will have goosebumps. My pocket money over a period of 4 years, 3 years, I saved. That is my first investment. They'll get goosebumps. What kind of commitment has he? Wow, has she? Then I took a bit of money, convincing my father, and I sacrificed my bike. I continued my old bike, and I sacrificed my new bike, and I converted into my next level of capital in the same bootstrapping stage. So this kind of explanation and reality proving will give lot of strength at your end itself. That is the first earning as a first source, I would stress. Then coming to family help. Taking a loan from father, it sounds funny. It has to be on record. Taking a loan from father and mother sounds funny, brother or sister sounds funny, but it has to be on record. And take this money, invest into your company. Give them a right to convert it into equity. Doesn't matter. Give them a right to convert it into equity. In a simple one-pager letter, promissory note sort of thing. Then have incubators, accelerators. If we are not sure of having the ability to fund ourselves, mobilize funds through directly to PVC, it is always advisable to look at accelerators. Maybe Y accelerator, Y incubator, or couple of locally homegrown accelerators, incubators. Maybe tomorrow, as you are planning to take startup brain to the next level, startup brain as an incubator accelerator, going through these conduits, channels is also advisable because it saves a lot of time for you on funding exercise. It only takes your time for the presentation, negotiation, not the scouting time, not identifying, scouting, researching, understanding where you will match, all those things. Then the venture capital, private equity. So thereafter, the strategic investors. Now, sir, having discussed these two, I should explain, not everyone will have the possibility of running through the whole sequence, or some may pass through these sequence. What should be the third approach, the strategic approach? Strategic approach is very, very important. That is, we don't have the wherewithal to mobilize all these funds. So you have a product, directly going and hitting the target customers, telling the customer, sir, I came to know you are importing these calculators from so-and-so country. I can manufacture this calculator here itself, and you will see 50% discount. These calculators are embedded into your books, into your systems, or one package, one of the package which you are importing. I can supply you at this cost. Can I be your strategic partner, supply partner? Can you give me a 10-year supply contract, 3-year supply contract? I'll supply you at a subsidized price. Times of India earned equity in many ventures. The classic celebrated example is Magic Bricks. We came to own Magic Bricks over a period of time, but initially we gave them space, advertisement, free of cost, in exchange for equity stake in their own company. And gradually we acquired it. That's a different story. But initially we gave them free of cost service and took equity. It's a business model. We didn't spend anything. What did we give them? Free space lying unsold in our paper was given to them at a price which we could have otherwise not sold, which would have been a more cost for us because fixed overheads have to be absorbed. That way, having this kind of supply partnerships with established or proven or target customers is the first point. Second, venture partnership. Venture partnership with the companies to whom you want to sell. Go and approach the best names which can invest, and then tell them, sir, can you look at a specific valuation? Fund me. This does happen in programs of seed sector, seeds, real seeds, the agri seeds. The seeds will be researched by various companies, and they approach companies like Advent, companies like the Bayer, companies like Nuzvidu, Kaveri Seeds, XYZ, these names, Myco, and these names, Monsanto, uh, these names, and you tell them, I'm working on a product which can be a complement product for you or a supplement product for you. Can you give me investment and hold all the IPRs, but let me hold 50%. Let all IPRs be in the same company. This will supply to you, or you can dispose of the company which you will pay. I will be 50% equity holder of this company, which is fully funded by you, And what do? I only do all the work of this R&D for this program. If program becomes successful, you have huge value. Microsoft did this exercise, and it is not out of context to discuss and to state that not one of the successful products of Microsoft is from their own R&D, but all of them are either from ventures where they funded or purchased. So this is a very successful model. We can target such kind of investors, go meet them, tell them you are diluting your equity, but you are having a promised funding pattern. In absolute terms, you enjoy huge returns. While in control terms, it could become 51, it could become 26, it could become 11 also, 11% also. But you have absolute returns huge in size, volume, and the industry knows who is the inventor, who is the master of this product. After such a long time of coming out from Britannia, Sunil Alagh still commands respect in the market because they know that he is one of the person who built that business for a long time. Therefore, you will continue to be the star of the industry in the industry, while you may be holding only 4%, only 5%, or 11%, doesn't matter. Third approach is forward agreements of the whole company. Many of our friends build their business with a sole motive of selling off to another competitor or to another taking over expert. So that is also another possibility. And forward agreement, having a forward agreement, ensuring funding will happen on a timely basis. And on the date of your exit, complete sale, you will have your returns on hand, for which you would have slogged. You would have gave your intellectual mind, time, effort, sacrifice your family time, personal time, friends time, all that stuff. There are three approaches, sir.
Got it. Thank you very much, sir. Vikas has a question. He is going to ask you directly on video. Go ahead, Vikas.
Please.
Thank you, Yash. Thank you, Kashyap. Thank you, Dr. Kishore. I think whatever you have mentioned and whatever the picture that for an ideal, not ideal, but the hustler, the startup entrepreneur, bootstrap, doing all of things on his own and all these things. This is very, very good. I think some of them, including me, fit that picture. So I have one question, sir, which you partly answered for the accelerator part. Why am I asking? Let me give you a very quick background story. I got recently selected. My startup got recently selected in T Block. That you must be knowing about the T Block, right, sir?
Yeah, I heard. Yeah.
Yeah. So we got selected in that. So as an accelerator, we are a bootstrap company. I'm the guy who's heading it from the last 2.5 years, and we never did raise. So the point is, what actually accelerators look like? What do they expect from startups? And maybe this question go to the people who are watching us. What is accelerator look like, and what do they ask in return, and how does they help? Like all in and everything, the way you have explained us in detail about everything. Can you help us with the accelerator part for a bootstrap startup, sir? Thanks a lot.
Yeah, very good question, Vikas ji. Excellent question. In fact, we missed out specifically on this point. This now, in a way, this completes the sequence of the discussion, honestly. All of us know that we can approach accelerators and then have an easy platform to get into the next level. But do they take all of us? No. Simple example is, to get into IIT, there is one popular coaching institute, training institute by name Ramaya's IIT Training Institute. The surprising factor is, because Ramaya will conduct an exam and it will take those who have got the ability to crack the IIT entrance exam, he himself is conducting exam and taking those who can easily crack, not everyone whoever comes to him. Therefore, across the state, across 2 states, many training institutes have come who are not training us, who are not training you to take IIT exam, but they train you to take Ramaya's exam. So they train you to take Ramaya's exam, and if you get into Ramaya coaching center, then Ramaya will take care of your training requirement for IIT. Similarly,
sir, this is a proper Indic, the way like back in the centuries, the way Indic, Satakshila, and all these amazing bodies, the universities. So they were so tough that around Takshila, they deploy the same kind of architecture. Like it was very hard to get into.
Correct, sir. Very interesting thing. Very interesting. Now, how do we become subject of accelerator? How do we become subject of accelerator? Or what is accelerator looking at? They look at many things, but some of the things what we mentioned need to be summarized and then put them at one place so that we understand what can catapult us onto the accelerator platform. The first most point what we're looking at is conceptual knowledge and reference. What is this conceptual knowledge? I have been a finance guy. If I start an engineering initiative without understanding how the basics of that product works, but because of my experience of 2-3 years, 2-3 years service, 10 years service, even 10 years service, I want to get into that business. Unless I enjoy very wide network of the industry, I will not be able to succeed because I am dependent on other technical team. I'm just a coordinator. What is the valuation I am bringing? Managerial valuation only, without technical expertise. Therefore, the conceptual knowledge of the promoter about that product, that solution, that service, what he is proposing, what he is working on rendering, is the first basic point what I look at, what any accelerator would look at. Then, the skin in the game, how much money you would have put, how much time you would have put, and what kind of research you have made, and what is your holistic understanding about the prospects of this product, about the industry, will all make a lot of difference. If you could recall 11-12 years back, not 11-12, sorry, 21 years back, when this matrimony sites as a concept has come just then into the picture, many had this thought of matrimony sites and had put their efforts individually at their own levels without understanding that there are other ventures coming with the same concept. They took a clue from the radio advertisements. 30 years back, radio advertisements would come, so and so Pandit, you can approach him, and then he will give references like that. And they got this concept of matrimonial sites. Many worked at once, separately, without understanding there could be competition. All of these ventures can't have the same market share. It has to be either divided or few may have to die. So we don't know. Therefore, to approach the accelerator, you need to have updated information about the market and the competition. The reason why in every standard format of pitch book, competitor slide is included is that you need to know who are your competitors, who are working on the similar features, how are you differentiating yourself. We are not differentiating, sir. Then we are sharing a pie in the market. How? Because there is a limitation for any venture to serve so many people, so many customers, and he helped me in understanding how many customers are there, and he has a limitation of serving all of them. Therefore, I am here. This is how I am achieving or demanding my share. So understanding the market and where required differentiating, where not required not differentiating, exactly tagging ourselves. We are like them. But because he's expensive and my product is cheaper, I can do it. Or because he can't serve the complete market because of these limitations, I can also serve. Geographical limitations also will come into play. You can explain. He is doing there. For example, Grab acquired Uber in Singapore. Why? In spite of being the dominant player across the world, Uber could not compete with Grab, as the brand recall of Grab in Singapore and Malaysia was much more than Uber in those two geographies. And Uber tried its best and realized that the cost of acquiring each customer is not recovered over a 10-year period and not sure of having a customer for 10-year period loyal to us, not sure of being in this business for 10 years in Singapore and Malaysia. Therefore, they let themselves acquired by Grab at a reasonably lower price and came out of that place. Understand this realistic case, what has happened, sir. Therefore, understanding the market and bootstrapping, being conceptually qualified where possible, or acquiring the degree, diplomas wherever not possible. You are not an engineer, but you got the idea, you could prove it. But you can't do engineering now because you've been a doctor. Therefore, you'll undergo a small diploma course or whatever and have a qualified formal certificate. And having the alpha beta tests with known names, known names. Prepare a note, put a confidentiality note, disclaimer, NDA sort of thing, and open a dialogue through formal note with the best of the target customers and establish that yours is the product and understand their response. They are agreeable to this product, but they realize that you don't have the scale to serve all of their requirements. They are agreeable or they appreciate your product, but explain to you that they're also working on similar product. Have these kind of communications on record. This is the third one. Then fourth one is meet up with your target customers, prospective investors, and everyone, and make presentation and show that I've already let the market understand that I am into this free. Fourth thing. Fifth, than being alone, how much ever knowledgeable and capable you are, have a team. Team could be 2, team could be 4, but not more than 5 or 6 in any case. And have a team. This also goes well with an accelerator. But representation can happen with only one person. The one who will participate in accelerator program, if RECI program is happening, could be 1, 2. But as a promoter team being 4 is the most ideal thing to happen. For some reason, something happening in terms of interest, in terms of life, inability, there always is a team. Don't call it team, our board, come team, come promoters, come executives who are working in this program from the start. That presentation will do well. These 4 points coupled with lining up some of the investments wherever possible at some valuation as a benchmark. These 5 points will make you an attractive proposition to accelerator platform, and they understand that you are fit to be Ramaya's IIT coaching center, and you can definitely win the IIT entrance exam.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
You put it very well using the Ramaya and IIT analogy, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
I think, Kashyap, do you have anything else on your mind to ask? You have received a lot of fans on the chat, sir. I don't know if you had a chance to scroll through it.
Thank you so much, sir. There
A
are
lot
some
of
questions.
people.
Yeah, some more questions. I think we'll send them mail because time is too short, and a lot of very valuable questions, very valuable questions. I owe them very humble response because some are very good questions. Some are corrections which are worth learning from, and some are examples, some are questions. All of them definitely demand command response from us. I load them and then I'll respond subsequently, sir, through our platform. So it will be meaningful.
Absolutely.
I have no further questions. It was a lot of gyan, lot of interesting insights, sir. So I've also been noting down. My internet was weak, so I had to disconnect in the middle. But I again got reconnected and made note of a lot of things actually. So Vikas, again, the question that he asked, like, even, I had the same question, how do you actually approach an accelerator? A lot of detailed explanations given by you. So thank you for that. A very detailed explanation.
We will have this recording online, sir. So I'll share the recorded version with all the participants here. They can spread the word and post it on their social media channels to get the word out. I think it has been one of the best sessions, and especially at a time where everyone is looking at, they have some downtime to actually plan their financials. I think the most amazing point that I have written down and boxed it is plan of execution has to be backed by plan of funding. I think that if there is one big takeaway, I would say most people end up with the whole business model, the idea, and how do you execute it. But seldom they look at what point will the money keeps flowing in and how do you plan forward, right? I think that's a very value point that differentiates probably the financially, the more planned startups versus the unplanned ones who just go about. So yeah, thanks all. I mean, from me, it's like a huge learning experience.
Also, thank you, sir. You have to allow me to thank So I've been tracking Startup Grind for a long time. In fact, ever since Kashyap ji introduced it to me, I'm seeing tremendous work being done by Startup Grind. I am sure Startup Grind has got all the potential to become a fantastic accelerator, incubator, and then become in the likes of the best of Mumbai Angel Network and even Y Incubator also, Y Accelerator also. So I wish you all the best, sir, and I'll be very humbly committed to Startup Grind to participate in future webinar sessions. And then I've noted a lot of programs what your colleague Mr. Kashyap has told me that Startup Grind is working on. I'll definitely be able to assist you in some of the programs, and we'll look to work together forward, sir. Thank you so much, and good night to all our members who have participated, supported, and encouraged us to have this valuable informative session.
There's one last question. Sailesh and a lot of people are asking, is there a way they can contact you if for any kind of assistance in terms of their future funding requirements and financials? Would you like to share
Yes,
your
sir. Yes,
email
sir.
ID at which they can reach you out, sir?
Yeah. I'm just giving my mail ID, sir.
Sure. It's okkishore@yahoo.co.in.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Great. So
this was probably the longest session that we ever had on Startup Grind, right?
Yeah, and
longest
I didn't.
Yet, I mean, it didn't feel like it was more than an hour and a half.
Like I didn't
It
realize
just
that
felt
I didn't realize that we were 1 hour into it until I saw the clock and okay, it was already 8 o'clock and now we are at 8:45. So I think Dr. Kishore is still in his office, so he has to
Yes,
go
sir.
home. So we will wrap this event. So yeah, thank you everyone. Thank you, sir. Once again, many thanks. It was a fantastic event, and thank you so much for being our guest and sharing so much valuable information with us. And thank you for all those great blessings that you have given Startup Grind. I'm sure we will try to live up to those expectations that you have set for us right now. So we would like to see you in more sessions, more panel discussions. We will have something, and even as a guest sometime maybe you can join us. And yeah, thank you very much. Thanks everyone. Thanks for making the time to join this evening. Have a great night. Bye bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.